So while interacting with her, I could find out why she can write such good books. So her first book for children, The Story of Babar, was acclaimed and was accepted as deeply engaging and delightful. She has also written books for adults like The Dead Camel and other stories, Close to Hope, and recently Jahangir. So, ma'am, I would like to proceed with your presentation.
Thank you so much, Akshay. Very kind. Thank you, Akshay. Very kind introduction. Hello. Thank you very much, Akshay. That's a very kind introduction, and thank you everyone for having me here. I'm really happy to be here. This VLF is wonderful. Before Akshay and I speak, I'll just give a quick little presentation about Jahangir. Thank you all for coming to listen to us talk about him. Jahangir, it's an ironic fact that Jahangir himself was a man who was very interested in the world around him. And almost immediately after he died, the world stopped being interested in Jahangir. This is a painting, and so the idea develops almost immediately after his death that Jahangir is actually not worth being interested in, that in fact he is just a kind of minor interlude between Akbar on the one hand, Akbar the Great, and that Shah Jahan, the builder of the Taj Mahal, and he is just sort of a placeholder in between. And this is a painting that is made during the reign of Shah Jahan. It shows Akbar at the center and Shah Jahan to his left, Jahangir to his right, and you can see Akbar is giving his crown to Shah Jahan, while Jahangir just looks on, not wondering, what's happened to him. But as it happens, he did become emperor, and he was emperor over a reasonably peaceful, prosperous empire for 22 years, which is no mean feat. And this is a life-size painting of Jahangir, painted with actual gold, and it conveys something of both the wealth and power that he exercised. Having said that, Jahangir was also not your usual emperor. He was not, for example, interested in the would be the conventional form of rulership, which is building your empire, expanding your empire, gaining new territory. He was interested more in the more pleasurable alternative to warfare, which is hunting. And this is a hunting scene with Jahangir. Then he's just killed a lion. He's got 4 rhinos at his feet. There's a cheetah hunting in the background. One of the things I discovered in the course of researching this book was that in the 17th century, North Indian plains were just crawling with lions, and now of course no more. Jahangir can't be held solely responsible for this, but he did what he could. At one point, he ordered a census of how many animals he had killed by his own hand. And it was discovered that from the age of 12 to the age of 50, Jahangir himself had killed 17,167 animals, which is an obscene and horrifying number. But it makes me feel better. I hope it will make you feel better to know, because he also classified by species. Of that 17,000, 10,000 were pigeons. And only about 80 were lions. This is a tidbit of information that occurs in the Jahangir Nama, which is really one of the most amazing contributions that perhaps Jahangir has made to history and to the world is this diary. It's a diary that he writes. It includes little facts, for example, like this about his hunting, but also in many ways it's an account of the people, the cultures, the languages, the music, the landscapes, the flowers, the animals of his empire that was Hindustan. And Jahangir wields a very descriptive pen. He can, he can describe a flower so that you can almost see it. He can describe, the stalks in his menagerie so that you can almost see them. He also, however, has at his command a very talented atelier of painters. And a recurring phrase in the Jahangir Nama is, I summoned the painters. And he might summon them, for example, to make something like this. If we could have the next slide, please. This is a beautiful elephant. You can almost see the smile on his face. It belonged to the... Yeah, maybe you can reduce the light. Now maybe you can see the expression on its face. The beautiful elephant that belonged to the Rana of Mewar, that was captured by Shah Jahan when he was still a prince. The next slide. If you could have the next slide. Yeah, this is the beautiful bird, again captured during the hunt and painted. Next slide, please. This is a less beautiful bird, one in the center. It is a dodo. And it is remarkable not just for the fact that it is painted, but it is the only painting of a dodo that is made from an actual specimen that exists in the world. Because everyone knew how fond Jahangir was of curious things and things. From the people bring him things, and somebody brought him a dodo and he had it painted, and this is the only one that exists now. But my favorite image from the paintings that are produced under Jahangir would be the next one. This is called the Dying Inayat Khan. Inayat Khan was a nobleman in Jahangir's court, and he came to him looking like this, and he said that I'm ill and I want leave. And Jahangir said, yes, of course, I can see that you're ill and you must take leave. And he gave him leave, he gave him 1,000 rupees, and he said, you go. But before that, he said he made a pose and he summoned the painters. And he made them paint this, and he says in his diary, he writes, he says, when painters try to depict illness or they try to depict death, they never get it right. And I want to see what it looks like. And to me this is interesting, not only because it's such a powerful image, but also because it's not a beautiful image. It's not. There's this idea of Jahangir as an aesthete who's only interested in beautiful things, but this is not a beautiful thing. This is an image of death. In fact, indeed, Inayat Khan died 2 days later. And to me, it suggests that, in a sense, all this recording of information, this collecting of data, this production of painting was not just an aesthetic endeavor, but it was also an endeavor of collecting data, very much in the sense that data is collected now in huge quantities by large governments, large multinational corporations, about large populations, as a way of understanding and governing large populations. While Jahangir was, of course, documenting the world around him, a lot of the paintings are also of himself. So this next slide. This, for example, is of Jahangir looking at Mary, the Madonna. His fascination for Christian art was very famous. There were even rumors that he had converted to Christianity. The next painting. This is another famous painting of Jahangir in conversation with a Brahmin ascetic called Zadgaonkar. This is somewhere in Ujjain. They have this conversation, but they meet more than once. They meet several times, and they always meet in private. You can see all the courtiers are on this side, and Jahangir and Zadgaonkar are separated from him by a big distance. Next slide, please. And this is an example of another type of portrait that Jahangir had painted of himself. These are called allegorical paintings. And this one is usually titled The Destruction of Poverty. So you can see Jahangir there shooting an arrow at that shriveled old man who represents poverty. In a way, you can think of this as Jahangir's kind of Garibi Hatao poster. But there's a scholar called Asghar Moin who's done a fantastic reading of this portrait. And he says, beyond what you can see on it, there's also an inscription on top. There's a Farsi inscription. And that inscription basically translates to Jahangir destroying misfortune and creating the world anew, right? And the whole thing is in Farsi, except for misfortune, they use a Hindustani word, Daridar. And as Aswar points out, Daridar of course derives from Daridra, who is the sister of the goddess Lakshmi. And there is a link between these two sisters and the festival of Diwali, on which the Lakshmi is welcomed into homes and Daridra is you try to keep her away. Also, one points out, if you look, that Jahangir is standing on a globe. There's a lion and a lamb, of course, those are symbols of peace that a good sovereign brings about. Under that, there is a man and a fish, and that is not an ordinary man or ordinary fish, that is Manu sitting on Matsya. That is the first avatar of Vishnu. And from these various clues, Asfar Moin suggests, from this idea of Vishnu, the first avatar of Vishnu, from this idea of Diwali, from this idea of creating the world anew, that Jahangir here is, portraying himself as a kind of Ram-like figure or a Ram-like sovereign. Of course, we don't know what Jahangir himself was thinking. Many people in fact spend a lot of time trying to figure out what he is thinking and what he actually believes. One of them is this next slide. This is a gentleman called Thomas Roe. Thomas Roe was the first English ambassador to the court of Mughal. He came as a representative of the East India Company. He came looking for trading concessions from the Mughal emperor. And he also obviously had many remarks to make about the kind of person Jahangir was, and he says, there was a great deal of speculation, especially amongst Europeans, on whether Jahangir might be converted to Christianity. If they had a Christian king in the Mughal court, it would be a great coup for them. So he's writing to people, and he says, one of the things he says is that Jahangir is either the easiest man to convert or the hardest. He says, because he will listen to anything, but he will not believe anything, because he's just an atheist at heart. And I thought that is a nice way of saying things. I also want to end with Thomas Roe, because when he arrives here, he arrives in the early quarter of the 17th century. And he's representative of the East India Company. Like I said, the EIC has been founded just 5 years or so before Jahangir attains the throne. So it's very, very nascent. And in the writings of Thomas Roe, how different the world was at that time, especially in the balance of power and the balance of trade. Because you have these traders who come and they are literally begging for trade. I mean, they have nothing to sell, they only want to buy. Thomas Roe says that the King's Mint in England is like an aching belly, because all the silver is flowing from it eastwards, because only things can be bought here and there's nothing that they can sell. So the balance of trade is completely tilted in favor of the East. And yet, I mean, whether Thomas Roe even imagined it or not, within a couple of centuries, that entire narrative has been reversed by Thomas Roe's descendants. And not only do they finish the Mughal dynasty, they also completely transform the balance of power and of trade across the globe. They replace, in a sense, emperors with merchants. So that is the end of my little presentation on Jahangir. Thank you.
Thank you, Parvati, for such a wonderful insight on the personality of Jahangir. So, I am a follower of Mughal dynasty since, my first time I was introduced in school. But then, you always had Akbar and then we skipped to Shah Jahan. So, why did you choose a Maruti 800 between a Mercedes and a BMW to ride?
I think it was partly chance and partly, it was something we were discussing. I was sitting with my publishers in the office and, we were talking about, like you said, I'd already written a children's book on Babur. And one of the things perhaps that I had enjoyed at that time was that Babur is one of the few emperors in the world of that time who has written his own memoirs, and that gives you an access to a person that is very difficult to get otherwise if somebody, if somebody else is writing about them. And the only other person in the Mughal dynasty who has done that is Jahangir. So I thought, okay, let me see what his writing is like, and I started reading, and I just enjoyed it so much. I mean, I now recommend it to everybody to read because it's very well written, it's very entertaining, it's full of little bits of anecdotes. It's full of all kinds of things, of course, about his drinking, about the murder of Abul Fazl, but also about, I mean, every other day I was going to somebody and saying, can you imagine what I just read? And I would have read, for example, that Jahangir went fishing somewhere and he tried fishing with this new kind of net and he managed to catch a dozen fish or something. He was so pleased with himself that he let all the fish go. But before he let them go, he pinned pearls into their noses. Another time they were marching somewhere, him and his courtiers. They were marching alongside a lake, a river, and there were a lot of flowers in bloom, oleander flowers in bloom. And Jahangir said he was sitting on his elephant and marching, and he was having a glass of wine, and he says it was so beautiful. And then he says, there was a slight rain, like maybe there is today, and suddenly the sky cleared, the clouds parted and you could see the blue, and there was still a little bit of rain in the air, and this light came, and I just loved it. The sight was so beautiful. I commanded all my Amirs to put oleander flowers into their turbans, and thus he says an amazing field of marching flowers was made. So it was just fascinating for me to see this man, and how he was living at this unimaginable life. So that was one thing, and then the other thing that actually in the course of writing it I began to realize was exactly what you said about Akbar. And it struck me that when we think about the Mughals, we think mainly about two of them. There's either Akbar or there's Aurangzeb, right? And they function as kind of black and white. There's the good Mughal and then there's the bad Mughal. And if you write about either of them, you have to have this idea in your head, in whichever way you tackle it. When you come to Jahangir, because so few, nobody cares about him, there's no pressure. So I didn't feel any particular pressure about whether I have to think of him in this way or think of him in that way, or he already has been thought of in this way, so should I try and think of him in a different way? I could just see him as a man who held so many contracts. So it was never just on the one hand good, on the one hand bad. There was always three hands with Jahangir. For example, there was, he's a man who comes to the throne with the support of, partly with the support of a conservative Sunni faction in the court. On the other hand, I would say he's also a man who, Thomas Rowe and many other people think of as a completely atheist, godless man. And on the third hand, he is this man who derives enormous spiritual, sort of almost nourishment from his conversations, say, with Jadru Hossain or from, a Christian iconography. I could see him in all his contradictions without feeling any kind of pressure.
So you're in love with him?
I did find him I was sad when I finished writing the book. I thought, I'll not get to spend any more time with him.
Yeah. So a big part of Jahangir was Akbar, right? A big part of the story. So what I could instantly connect with this book and Jahangir, and I guess young readers here could connect to is having a very successful and intimidating father. So when your father is as successful as Akbar, right? And you have mentioned it very well. Every story of Salim begins with his father, even Salim's. And the next thing is the remarkable observation. So his father, Akbar, was his greatest joy and what is eternal torment. So, so people who are studying mind, they will find a kind of Freudian principle working here. So do you think Jahangir was someone who had a lot to express but was suppressed by a father who could not communicate with him? So another way of question is, had Akbar not been great, could Jahangir get the time or get the space to express himself and become great?
Well, I mean, see, on the one hand, I think what you said about his relationship with his father, for me, again, when I started writing it, that was the emotional core, because, I mean, how do you understand a man who lived in the 17th century, that also was the emperor of this, magnificently wealthy, almost unbelievably grand empire. It's difficult to imagine, but if you see him as the son of Akbar the Great, and a son who came after so many prayers, and everybody knows this. And this is the first story that anyone hears about Jahangir. That Akbar went to Salim Chishti and he said, "I don't have the Salim Chishti." Said, "You will have 3 sons," and he was named after Salim and all of that. And he was deeply desired, and then he quickly became a disappointment. And on the one hand, of course, I mean, who will match up to somebody like Akbar the Great? But on the other hand, it also became easier to understand because I suppose everyone, at some level, all of us grew up trying to match the expectations of our parents, right? And that is part of growing up, is understanding how far you can match them, not match them, exceed them, how you're going to negotiate that relationship. And in their case, it was very easy to. I mean, there was a sort of deep emotion to it, and obviously Akbar was an impressive man, and it was after, in fact, I had finished writing this. More recently, I was reading the writings of Father Montserrat, who was a Jesuit priest who came to Akbar's court, and Akbar made him the tutor to 3 of his sons. And Father Montserrat writes that when they first started having classes, the 3 princes, they were very young, they were terrified. And the Jesuits realized that they were terrified because Akbar had a bad temper. He used to shout. He also used to beat them. And he also used to allow other people, like who were in position of authority over them, to also beat them if they wanted to. So these boys were terrified that the Jesuit fathers were also going to beat them. And when they realized that they would not, they were so relieved and so happy that so you can see that Akbar was a strict, demanding father. And so naturally it would have been difficult to grow up. And of 3 sons, all of whom he wanted so much, 2 of them he had to watch die almost in front of him of drink, and this.
All 3 of them started doing substance abuse.
A lot of substance abuse. Yeah.
So again, it follows the whole trait that starts from Krishna. His sons disappoint. Then Mahatma Gandhi's sons disappoint. I guess the only daughter that lived up to the legacy of father was Indira Gandhi. So she was a strong person.
And she was not a son also.
She was not a son. So that is my daughter. So why Indira Gandhi was? So understanding the misunderstood Jahangir, right? So I think women also form a big part of that puzzle. And I was really envious of Jahangir when I started reading. So it's not about just women, not as in the romantic or love kind of thing, but Hamida Begum, grandmother, Gulbadan Begum, the grand Bua. I find all of them having a very different kind of feeling about Jahangir, the protective feeling, and they could connect to Jahangir. I mean, so in the book she has mentioned it very well, the family dynamics which will come to later on. So that Akbar gets reprimanded, for trying to wean off Jahangir from wine. So, there are 2 questions in this. What it is about Jahangir that made him so appealing. And Akbar was very unfortunate in that. And the second question is, what role did they play in really making Jahangir sustain his empire in spite of the mistakes, the countless mistakes that he did?
No, so I think the women in this dynasty, in the Mughal dynasty, did play a substantial role both in front and behind the scenes in keeping not necessarily the peace, but in negotiating between fathers, sons, uncles, nephews, so that everyone wouldn't sort of murder each other. So in that sense, they played certainly a significant role. At one point, Twice, in fact, in the life of Jahangir, they mediate on his behalf with Akbar. Jahangir has just gone off into rebellion, and then one of his stepmothers, Salima Sultan Begum, goes to him to Allahabad and to bring him back and effect a reconciliation between father and son. In the end, the final reconciliation also happens thanks to Hamida Banu Begum, who is Akbar's mother, Jahangir's grandmother. And that happens because Akbar has finally had enough of Jahangir, and he has said, I'm now going to go to war with him and I will, subdue him in this way because there's nothing else that's clearly working. And he's on his way, and then suddenly it starts to rain, so they can't cross the river, and then news arrives that Hamida Banu, his mother, is unwell. And at first Akbar said, I'm not going because she's doing this just in order to stop me going and attacking her precious grandson, so I'm not going back. But then another envoy arrives and says, no, she's really unwell, she's on her deathbed. So he goes, and his mother dies, and he's very grief-stricken. And then after she dies, Jahangir finds his opportunity to go and commiserate with his father, and then they effect once more they are reconciled. So yeah.
So that is what I found MPS. So since I need to cover questions, we have 10 minutes left.
Sure.
To have audience questions now. So tomorrow, if say there is a film that is being made of Jahangir, who would you love? Which actor would you choose for Jahangir if it was up to you?
I don't know. I'll just have to say maybe Ranbir Kapoor.
So Ranbir Kapoor precisely. So.
But you're also thinking Ranbir Kapoor. Seriously?
Yes. He has that eyes and that Jahangirish kind of aura around him. That
he also has a sort of slacker aura. Like he can also sort of a lazy kind of lazy charm. Yeah.
Lazy charm, right? So. Why, he had two brothers, Daniel, Buran, but both of them were drunkards. So apparently there was not much of competition for him, Salim. But then why his life was constantly rebellion? I mean, he rebelled against his father multiple times.
I wouldn't say constantly.
And was it a failure or a success?
No, I wouldn't say that he rebelled multiple times. He rebelled basically in the last 5 years of his father's life. Jahangir had gone off and set up court in Allahabad. That's where he went and stayed. And he got himself a throne. He got himself, started calling himself Shah Salim and all of that. There was competition between Murad and Daniel and Salim in the sense that they were, first all three were drunkards. Only Salim managed to bring it under control because at one point the doctor told him that if you don't, in 6 months you'll be dead. So he managed. The other two didn't. Akbar himself was not playing between the three. He would favor one person with something, like with some, he would give him, one person would get the port of Gujarat as his to command, another person would get something else, another Jagir, another province as his, everyone would get, suddenly one Murad would get a wonderful horse, and Danyal would be told that he can pitch a particular kind of red tent that only the emperor was allowed. So Akbar was also playing between them. And there was of course a secret competition, a hidden competition, which was Salim's own son, Khusro, who was Akbar's grandson, and Akbar was very fond of Khusro, and Akbar in the end it literally comes down to an actual claim for the throne that is made for Khusro on his behalf in a committee of the nobility of Akbar. They meet in a kind of parliament, and one side proposes that no, Salim is not will not make a good emperor, so let Khusro be the emperor, and Salim therefore has to get his own backing. So part of what he's doing in Allahabad is actually creating his own support base. So he's giving out his own jagirs to people, he's giving out titles to people and creating sort of links of loyalty for people who will then support him later. So in the end, the question of success and failure you can only say because he did finally get the crown and Khusro didn't. So he did, he did succeed despite the odds and despite the appearances.
Yeah, that is true. So there was a beautiful phrase that she used. So we had during interaction, I was so he rebelled once or twice. So she said every rebellion of Salim's was an incremental success. So 2 or 3 rebellions attempt he had, so it was an incremental success. So talking about Mughal dynasty, right? You mentioned that people begged to have trade with us, okay, with India at that time. So I have a theory. I just wanted to ask whether you agree with it or not. So Mughal, at one time they had 53% of world GDP, right? But then Mughal society was a very inward-looking society. So something that we can see now, Pushpak Viman to 1000 saal pehle bhi tha. So Mughals were so self-satisfied with themselves. So Ghalib wrote a beautiful letter. He said to a friend, so a friend asked him to translate Quran from Persian to English. So Ghalib replied saying that the world is going somewhere and you are still stuck in the past. So do you think this thread, still we are going through that phase where we are slowly becoming inward looking and looking in the back?
I mean, I don't know, I would certainly hope not. But to begin with the Mughals themselves, I mean, certainly there was this thing of, I think there were two competing forces. Because when you read the history of the Mughals, you always wonder, like, how come, it's not like they don't go to the coast. They go to the coast, they go to the sea. Jahangir, Akbar, both of them, they see the sea for the first time, and you can imagine these Central Asians have come from God, and then they're seeing this sea, and they go for rides on it also, but they never go ahead. But that doesn't mean they were not interested in sending people. So Akbar several times tries. One time he wants to send an ambassador, like Thomas Roe has come from England to here. Akbar wants to send an ambassador from his court to Portugal. But this fellow was so reluctant to go that he left Agra, but then when he reached somewhere around here only, he ran away and he defected to the Deccan. Because I guess on the one hand people just didn't want to leave because things were much better here, So, and yes, in the end, it was this sort of, perhaps this excessive comfort and failure to keep up technologically, and also it was this, this emergence of this force of not just the merchant and the trader, but the force of a joint stock company, which no one had seen before in the world. And I would recommend this William Dalrymple's new book, The Anarchy, which explores what exactly happened in the 18th century and how this company of merchants with its headquarters sitting in England manages to completely overrun the empires here. So, anyway, it's a complicated question, and I think I've given you a complicated half answer.
So, let's move on to audience questions. So, readers, I hope, sir.
Someone was looking at Jahangiri. I'm curious what role she really had in his life.
She is in fact there in the Tuzugiri, very affectionate. He says about her that at one point he falls ill. And when an emperor falls ill, it's a dilemma whether to tell anyone or not, because the illness of an emperor can also mean an illness for the empire. There will be riots and chaos. So he wouldn't tell everybody. He said, I only told the Begum Nur Jahan, who has of everyone the most affection for me. So he mentions her there, then he mentions her to 3 other occasions. On one point he actually mentions her because there's news of Shah Jahan has had a successful campaign in the Deccan, and news of it comes to Jahangir, but it comes via Nur Jahan. So he says that Nur Jahan came and told me about it. That's sort of admitting that she was the one who was receiving the news, not him. So he does mention, and she does play a very significant role in his life. The question, I suppose, that everyone sort of wants is that everyone asks themselves what Nur Jahan is. Was she controlling him, and was he a henpecked husband, and was she a back? And I found for myself the most satisfactory answer in a theory that has been proposed by a modern historian called Corinne Lefebvre, who said that actually this idea of Noor Jahan as this controlling van derives from two main sources. One is Shah Jahan and one is Thomas Roe. And Shah Jahan also, much like Jahangir, rebelled against his own father, against Jahangir in the last few years of his life. Once he became emperor, he couldn't blame, you can't blame the emperor for rebelling against him, especially when you are the emperor now yourself, right? So emperor can't do anything wrong, but you can suggest that the emperor was being prevented from being an effective emperor by his wife. So all the blame then can fall on her. And similarly for Thomas Roe, because Thomas Roe comes with these trade concessions that he wants, he never actually gets them. He has and also perhaps wants to portray his relationship with Jahangir as having been one of, closeness, affection, affability. But also he realizes that Noor Jahan wields a great deal of power. So again, it's in his advantage to portray Jahangir as a man who can't make decisions.
Right. And also, I would like to add, 100 last years of life, he could not effectively manage. So, and for a society at that time to have women in control and actually managing things well. So, it was not soothing to the male ego at that time. So, there are a lot of narratives in which Noor Jahan proves to be a good administrator. So, I guess it has got to do with colored perspective also.
It could be a little bit of that. It could also be because actually the idea of woman ruling was not so alien. There were many strong women in the dynasty, including Hamida Banu Begum, of course, but another one of Humayun's wives, the youngest wife, called Ma Chojar, who, when Humayun died, was in Kabul with Humayun's youngest son, Muhammad Hakim. And she, because Muhammad Hakim was so young, becomes basically the de facto ruler of Kabul. And this is, accepted and acknowledged. But
so very perspective. I'm sorry for cutting you off because
sorry.
So there's this one instance he mentions, like prisoners are fed with lots of saffron just to check whether saffron turns poisonous. A lot of eating saffron can turn poisonous. So how much of these ridiculous experiences are actually true? And plus, Jahangir was someone who lived life on his own terms. He lived life large. So how much of this actually affected the administration of the empire?
So that it was not, and yes, that experiment did take place. Jahangir conducted many strange experiments. One, my favorite, is his air pollution experiment, because he went to Ahmedabad and he had gone with great expectations. He had heard that Ahmedabad was a great place and he thought, wow, I'm going to see a lovely city, and then he hated it. He said it's horrible, and he said it's dusty and the air is bad, and he felt ill and he had to eat khichdi, and he said, I've never eaten khichdi since I was a child and I thought I'll never have to eat it again, but now I'm having to in Ahmedabad. So just to prove to himself what the quality was, he had 2 sheep skinned. One he hung up in Ahmedabad and one he hung up a few 20 kilometers ahead in Ahmedabad. And he checked and he saw, and he was proven right, because indeed the sheep in Ahmedabad, I think, rotted in about 8 days, and the one, 8 hours, and the one in Ahmedabad lasted 14 hours or something. So then, so he did these kind of experiments. As to his, the idea of him, he certainly, somebody has said that he probably never breathed the sober breath in his adult life. On the other hand, he had a great deal of discipline. So again, Thomas Roe will say, for example, he says that you can set your watch by his appearances. The morning appearance, the afternoon, the darshan in the morning, the public audience in the afternoon, the private audience in the evening. All of this was done in a very TikTok sort of fashion. And Thomas Roe says that just as the public, people are slaves of the emperor, the emperor himself is in a reciprocal bondage to them, because he has to appear, he has to do the duty that he's doing, because if he doesn't do it, the empire will topple. So a certain discipline was enforced and necessary. If he hadn't had that discipline, he wouldn't have lasted 22 years.
Any more questions?
At the end of her, but they have this path of roses made, and they walk to the center to express their equality and love. So is there any truth in that, or the entire thing is just a romantic imagination?
No, that particular story is just imagined. There's no particular truth in it. But the idea of their affection and closeness to each other, I think certainly that comes through, even in the little bits that there are, even in his mentioned. And the idea of himself as a man who thinks of his wife as an equal partner, and as somebody, the sense that comes through, basically for me, the sense that came through was one of sort of a mutual affection. And a mutual affection that develops not as sort of young love, because both of them are, he's in his 40s, she's in her 30s. He's of course married many times. For her also it's her second marriage. And yet they share, so they don't have this youthful passion, but they do share many sort of mutual interests, like in hunting, in architecture, in painting. So kind of middle-aged affection is what they share, and that comes through very nicely.
Almost 100 years to be built. It was built across 3 generations from Akbar to Aurangzeb. So what was Jahangir's contribution toward building that? Because if you see the boat, there is a distinct the red stone built by Akshay, and then the marble one built by Shah.
Sir, can you just shorten it?
So what exactly was the contribution of Aurangzeb or Jahangir in that boat?
It really to be for sure. But really the contribution to the Agra fort was Akbar and then Shah Jahan. The two of them are the sort of big builders. Jahangir's more major contribution to art in that sense is through the paintings.
Can I take one last question? Can I take one last question?
Sorry, I can actually, one thing he records in his memoirs is how the railing, like if I'm Jahangir, I'm sitting here, I would be slightly elevated, there would be a railing here. Railing was earlier made of wood, he had it made of silver, because he thought it would look, more grand.
Sir.
Both, I think, are nature lovers, and
Yes.
so could you tell us more about it?
No, sir. Both have similar writing style in that they're very direct, they're very unself-conscious. They just say what they feel and they describe what interests them. They're both sort of very curious. So whatever interests them, they describe, and they're also very very skilled at description. Babar's memoirs, in a sense, because he lived not a longer life but a more full life. So much more happened. So there's a lot more information there. Jahangir's memoirs is in that sense more anecdotal, more sort of stories and incidents and little sort of tidbits like that. Not the sort of a dense narrative.
So I'll just squeeze in one last question, then we are up. One short question. Yeah, ma'am.
Like for instance, you were mentioning between Akbar and Shah Jahan, this person Jahangir. Do you find any kind of connection of their architectural contribution and their becoming famous or known in general?
That is a question.
Yes, I would say for Shah Jahan, I think the Taj Mahal is the reason that he lives on in the popular imagination. Akbar's one, I think, would be very different, because he was the one who actually built. He built some buildings like the Red Fort and all of that, but also he built the empire. So so even if everyone else was forgotten, he would have to be remembered, because he.
Fatehpur Sikri has its own.
Fatehpur Sikri has its own, of course, and I think Allahabad Fort also he did, and Sikandra I think he started and then Jahangir completed. But I would not say that in Akbar's case it would be the architectural contributions that make him memorable. It would be his sort of his empire building that really gives him a place in history.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Parvati, for this insight, and thank you for introducing me to Jahangir.
Thank you for
I will definitely, use these tactics, to get some more affection from women around me. My wife, my mom.
Yeah, just be charming.
Yeah. Thank you, readers. It was a lively reader audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.